10% Happier is the story of Dan Harris. Dan Harris is an ABC News correspondent. I think he's still an ABC News correspondent. And he has led a very high-charged life. He's gone to Afghanistan and reported on the war in real time. He's been in the Middle East and disaster zones several times. This is a person who has like a very high-strung life. And he is kind of an adrenaline junkie in the beginning of the book. He gets addicted to cocaine. He has a lot of just like issues that I identify with, not the cocaine, but like overeating and just kind of like a high-powered adrenaline lifestyle where if you're not doing something all the time, you don't feel like you're alive. I think as a side note, I'm a person that could really easily get into cocaine for this reason. That's why I haven't messed with it. I think I could do that. So Dan Harris is successful by any measure. He's in front of tens of thousands of people. His career is skyrocketing, and he is living this adrenaline-filled life. But he's stressed like crazy, and he's unhappy. And Dan Harris, and this is the real core theme of this book that I want to impart to you, is that when I'm looking for self-improvement type stuff, I am looking for material that strips the sort of spiritual element, the kind of like up in the clouds element, out of self-improvement and brings it down to a hard practical level, because that's what we identify with in this day and age. I think like younger demographic identifies with, I kind of like the spiritual stuff and like some of that and incorporating some of that stuff. I recognize that the majority of people don't absorb information that way. So I try to stick to empirical stuff. I try to stick to practical stuff. And Dan Harris, I liked this book so much because Dan Harris is very much this kind of person. He's a person who really is looking for like a practical way to improve his life. And but what's so cool about this book is because he's really famous and he's an ABC News correspondent, he can actually go to all of these self-improvement gurus and interview them and ask them questions and kind of find out what they're all about. And he does in the book. So once he kind of identifies his adrenaline-fueled lifestyle and that this is a problem that's leading to him unhappiness and stress and probably an early death, he says, I got to fix this. And the first person he finds is a guy named Eckhart Tolle. I don't know if anybody here knows anything about Eckhart Tolle. Eckhart Tolle wrote a book called The Power of Now. He's this dude. And Eckhart Tolle's book, The Power of Now, was like an Oprah book club, a New York Times like bestseller. It says it's a guide to spiritual enlightenment. Now, in my opinion, The Power of Now is a fantastic book. I've had debates back and forth about this book being a book club book because it is actually so good for self-improvement. But I think that it is too high in the clouds for my audience to receive. So I don't know if I'll recommend it. I've read this book 2 times. I'm still in the up in the air about if I'm going to recommend this book. But Eckhart Tolle was the first person that Dan Harris encountered and found out that his kind of view of spirituality was not accessible. That when you really sit someone down and you say, look, how do I improve my life? They say, well, like you have to focus on the present and you have to try to be more objective and realize that you are a finite being and you're going, it's like a lot of like really like high level concepts. And Dan is like just looking for like, no, like just give me the meat of it. Give me the gist of it. Something that I can practice, something I can do in real time. And he doesn't find that through Eckhart Tolle. So the next person he goes to is Deepak Chopra. Deepak Chopra is another big self-improvement person. Now, this guy, I've read a lot of his books, and this guy is even too spiritual for me. This guy writes some crazy stuff, and you know if it's too spiritual for me, if it's too like weird for me, then you know it must be weird. So here's some book titles. Okay, You Are the Universe. quantum healing, super genes, the soul of leadership, life after death. He has written a ton of books, by the way, like a ridiculous amount of books. And again, so Dan Harris goes to him and realizes that it's just a little bit too weird, a little bit inaccessible. And so he backs off of that too. Dan had a lot of problems with just like absorbing this kind of person. And so, and if somebody can post in chat the person he did meet who was his mentor for a while that taught him about the next subject, I appreciate that. Was it Epstein? Trying to remember. Anyway, it's not on my show notes. So Dan is now at a point where he knows that he has to change something, and in fact, his life events are kind of culminating in this really big moment, this adrenaline like fueled moment, which is a famous panic attack that he has on live TV. That we can watch.
Lines of the morning. Want to go to Tony Perkins now.
So this is an old broadcast, and we'll show what happens.
He is. Once the fear...
Or I think we are... I'm a little bit ahead. Here we go.
Embarrassing day of my life.
We're going to go now to Dan Harris, who's at the news desk. Dan.
Good morning, Charlie and Diane. Thank you. This is me 10 years ago. And the reason this is the most embarrassing day of my life is not that it looks like I've been attacked by a blow dryer and a can of hairspray. No, it's that I am about to freak out on national television. Health news now. One of the world's most commonly prescribed medications may be providing a big bonus. Researchers report people who take cholesterol...
Listen to him like breathe. It's crazy.
...lowering drugs called statins for at least 5 years may also lower their risk for cancer. But it's too early to prescribe statins slowly for cancer production.
At this point, I realize I'm helpless, so I bail right in the middle.
That does it for news. We're going to go back now to Robin and Charlie.
All right, thanks very much, Dan Harris at the news desk with some of the headlines.
So he has an outright panic attack on national TV, and now he knows he has to do something. This is a result of cocaine, stress, crazy high-powered lifestyle, and he hasn't been able to get any help really, or not a lot of help from these spiritual gurus, right? These Eckhart Tolles and these Deepak Chopras. But he has found something there that he knows there's something to it. So he got a lot out of The Power of Now, and Tolle's new book after that was A New Earth. And he knew that there was something there to be learned, but it's just sort of like shrouded in this just too much spirituality, too much like kind of fluff. But he's having this real problem. So then he meets a person. He meets a person named Mark Epstein, and Mark Epstein introduces him to a technique called meditation. A technique called, I believe it was Vipassana meditation, which is a meditation that I've practiced for many years. And says, hey, like, let's strip the spiritual mumbo jumbo, and let's do this. Let's meditate for 10 minutes a day. And if you remember, the meditation challenge is the 30-day meditation challenge that we had on the stream was for this form of meditation. And I gave a couple of resources on how to meditate, as well as some guides that I found, the best guides that I found on meditation. So when we discuss the idea of meditation, we're really talking about sitting comfortably somewhere, focusing on your breath, acknowledging your thoughts but not holding on to them, and returning your focus to your breath when you notice you've become distracted. You do that for 10 minutes, you get up and you're done. And that's how Dan Harris started. He started by doing 5-10 minutes, which he could barely handle, on either in his office or on the floor of his bedroom, basically wherever he could. And the rest of this book is the story of how that singular practice eventually culminated in a 10-day Vipassana retreat, which I'll explain in a moment, has changed his life for the better, and how he suspects that other people will be changed as well. And so herein we have the title of the book, 10% Happier, meaning that if you practice meditation on a regular basis, you will, in his opinion, be about 10% happier. This is a catchphrase that he developed after he'd been meditating for a while. He couldn't figure out how to sell this to people because it was attached to such a weird spiritual idea. So he said, if you just meditate, you'll be about 10% happier. And that was something that kind of caught on. And that's pretty great. That means every 1 in every 10 minutes of your day is going to be happier. That's pretty awesome. It's a really big change, I think, in almost everybody's life if you're 10% happier. The other thing I want to say is it's also a realistic change. It's a change that if you're 10%, it's not 50% happier, 75% happier. It's not this cured my erectile dysfunction, and now I'm like slaying chicks like back and forth. I have millions of dollars. I closed my eyes and I imagined it, and there's a new Porsche in my driveway. Like, it's not that kind of thing, right? It's not the sort of self-improvement that's promised to you by these like these more like fluffy like The Secret and things like that. This is 10% happier. It's not 75% happier. It's 10% happier. A very realistic outcome for doing something realistic. Over the course of the book, he goes through the empirical data, both his own research as well as other people's research on meditation. And the data on the benefits of meditation, the scientific data, is unreal. There are hundreds of studies, thousands of studies that show unbelievable benefits from meditation. From basic things like lowering blood pressure and stress to really crazy stuff like growing new brain matter, neurogenesis, reduction of major diseases. It is an awesome practice that I encourage anybody to look into if they're interested in more of the empirical data. You can do what I just did here and look into it. I also linked some studies in our meditation challenge that I thought were interesting, but there are wide meta-analysis research studies on all kinds of crazy things that meditation can do. And he talks a lot about that. So Dan Harris takes up meditation, and the second half of the book is his approach to self-development, which is a very human approach that I really like because he doesn't take on the persona of a person who is like holier than us. He's a jerk. He's aware he's a jerk. He's not perfect. He acknowledges his faults in a really human way, but he says things that are profound that you can tell that are authentic to him as a result of his own experience of things. And I have in my show notes, I said, someone as skeptical as Harris finds meditation helpful and eventually comes out to his coworkers about being a meditator, makes my own attempts to meditate justifiable. I think he quotes some compelling evidence of the effectiveness of meditation and shows how it has helped him in concrete ways. He doesn't claim that he's had some kind of incredible transformation, but he says that he has negative thoughts still and sometimes struggles to quiet the jerk inside his head. He just seems like a regular guy, and that's what makes this such a good book. So within this, that's the gist of 10% Happier, basically. There is a bunch of other aspects of it that I want to highlight now. That I think are really cool. So now we're going to talk about kind of like realizations that I think Dan Harris has had. And some things I have to say about the book. My favorite chapter was near the end. It was a chapter called Hide the Zen. But I'm going to talk about that chapter, but I also want to talk about the kind of like central idea of this book. So when I say the ego, does everyone know what I'm talking about when I say the ego? I don't know if I know what I'm talking about when I say the ego. So when I refer to the ego, I'm referring to the big cloud of thoughts, feelings, emotions, and things that make up our self-identity. This is me separate from the world. So your ego, we all have one, is constantly assessing your self-worth in relation to the rest of the world. So it's looking at how much money you have. You're looking at your looks, your social status, and then you're finding people and things to compare yourself against. So a good example of like a very easy comparison is like my girlfriend likes Formula One racing, and I'd never watched Formula One racing before. So I don't know if you watch Formula One racing. It's actually pretty pog, but those guys are really, really hot, like ridiculously hot. Everybody in Formula One racing is like a ridiculously hot guy, and they're super young, and they're like crazy, crazy hot. I just don't know how to describe them besides they're hot. I mean, they're also really wealthy. They're super famous, and they're like just like so. Like when I'm watching F1, I'm like, man, I am never ever going to be that dude, right? That's never a person that I can even get close to. Even if I was gonna get as fit and as popular as one of those people, I just wouldn't be as young. So can't do it at some level. And that's the ego making that comparison. The whole feels bad man emote on Twitch and Pepe hands. That's all ego, pretty much. It's comparing ourselves to things and people around us and us not being good enough for those things and people. And the default setting of the ego, the default setting is more, right? Because I don't look good enough, because that guy has more money than me, or because that girl is hotter than me, because that person is more successful than me, I need more success, money, whatever. But the problem with the ego is it's this never-ending feedback loop. It just never ends, right? The minute that you give it a new achievement, the baseline for its desire is reset, and it starts looking for a new thing. This is why you get to the point where you see so many wealthy people, and there's been study after study that's been shown that people that make over $74,000, I think it is, or $75K, just don't get, and that's a lot of money, but they don't get any happier. At the point where you're at 300K versus 300 million, it doesn't matter because you satisfied your basic needs. You're not getting an ego boost from this pursuit of money. And many people who are, and I've met many people who are millionaires and extremely wealthy, have not found personal happiness because they just keep pursuing wealth, and it doesn't seem to like fill that gap within them. Some people try to do it through love. Some people try to do it through drugs and sex and rock and roll, whatever you can imagine. My opinion, this is a personal opinion on this issue, is that there is actually nothing in the world that will ever shut down the ego besides self-awareness. And that's a very Buddhist opinion, right? So take it with a grain of salt. I'm a pretty devout Theravada Buddhist, right? But that is very firmly my opinion, is that you could find true love, the love of your life, and it would be the most amazing girl possible. And you would think to yourself, like a lot of people do, finding this love is what is fulfilling for me. Now my life is happy. And I think without a lot of training and self-awareness, you're still not going to get there. It just doesn't seem to me that there is anything you can do besides get self-awareness to make yourself happier. Okay, so how do you get self-awareness? Well, you meditate. It seems to be the only way that human beings can do it, or some form of meditation. There are other things you can do, but when awareness being the final issue, meditation is probably the closest, the fastest way you could go there. So the ego is never happy. And my favorite chapter, going back to that, was a chapter called Hide the Zen, where Dan was first having a problem where he was meditating a lot, and meditation has this way of making you sort of disconnect from the results of things, so you become less invested in the outcomes in your life. Now that can be good or bad, right? Obviously it can be good because it makes you less stressed, or can make you less stressed. It can be bad too because you don't achieve at a high level, or as high a level as you may want. And one of the biggest criticisms I get about meditation when I teach this is, well, how do I keep my edge? How do I keep being invested in the world if I'm just going to disconnect and be apathetic about everything? Because a lot of people associate Buddhism with apathy. But Hide the Zen, the chapter, is about this, where previously in the book, Dan has this period of time where he gets slow and his career starts to drop off. His bosses notice it. He stops like going aggressively for the stories. This is a really cool kind of like progression of this book, because the first part of the book you can see like he's emailing producers, he's complaining when he doesn't get a story. He's on it, right? So he's just getting more hustle because he's getting like more opportunity because he's just hustling harder. He drops off as he starts to meditate, and then he becomes worried about this. And Hide the Zen is about his realization of how to keep your edge and how to strive while still being detached from the outcomes. And this is such a complicated concept that I had to write a lot down to try to kind of explain this. So you can always strive, but that thought has to be tempered by the realization that the universe is ultimately entropic, meaning that everything that we have here in some amount of time, probably soon, is going to fade away, is going to die. There's a great quote on Twitter by a dude named Jocko Willink, who's a dude I follow. I think he posted this: "Your piercing eye will dim and darken sooner rather than later if you let it." Just meaning that inevitably, that fire in your eye as a young person will go away. And the universe ultimately will consume us, and then probably, we're done with this fantastic journey of a life. And meditation puts you in touch with that principle that I think we really want to avoid. I'm going to get super real for a minute here. A lot of things in the West hide death from us and hide the idea of impermanence from us. So when people get old, we shuffle them off into homes, and we have gentle security guards who usher them back into their rooms if they try to escape onto the street, so that you don't typically see a lot of 80 or 90-year-old people around. We put them into homes, and then they sit there. When someone dies, we clean up the body, and we move it away very quickly, and we get that out of there. Whereas if you ever go to India or a country like that, there's going to be bodies all over the place. It would be very weird to see a dead body, wouldn't it? In the United States, it'd be extremely strange. The funerals are like these closed off events, only through close family. They are not celebrations; they're tragedies typically. And what the picture I'm trying to paint for everybody here is that the West largely skips over the issue of death and tries really hard to not make you think about it. Even our news and media removes graphic imagery and tries very hard not to show bodies or violence. And so this entire... And I'm not making a statement. I'm not saying this is good or bad. I just want you to be aware that this is happening in the West, and then you can make your own interpretation of it. One thing I will say is I think when you get away from impermanence and this idea of death and the fact that we're all going to die, it would seem to me that you would be like, well, that's a good thing, right? Because I don't want to stress out about that. That seems like a really stressful thing. Well, in fact, when you focus, and speaking as a Buddhist again, and I don't talk about my Buddhism. I say that like it's like a drug, a habit. like I don't talk about my Buddhism very often. Very rarely do I talk about the fact that I'm a Buddhist, because the scripture in Buddhism says that you should only really talk about being a Buddhist when you're asked, and I don't ever get asked questions about being a Buddhist, so I just don't talk about it. because there's no need to ask. Back to anyway. But a very central Buddhist concept is impermanence. The idea being that if you meditate over and you conceptualize your own death, life itself becomes much richer. And there's a great game on Xbox, jumping around here, but same subject, called Lost Odyssey that explored this concept. Lost Odyssey was like a sleeper game that I feel like not a lot of people played. It's a fantastic game about being an immortal. The game opens up and you're on a battlefield and you're fighting like a bunch of different people. And there's an event that happens where a spell goes off and it kills everybody on the battlefield. And then you just stand up, like after a few minutes, and you look around. And it's such a cool commentary on the idea. The whole game is a commentary on being an immortal, and how apathetic you become, how disconnected and dulled your experience of reality is, because you are an immortal. Death itself can't impact your life. So what can? So the beauty of being immortal, and the story of Lost Odyssey, and the story of, and the idea of Buddhism, and the conceptualization of impermanence, and getting all this stuff together into a big clump, is that life becomes infinitely more beautiful when you know it's going to end, when you know that every minute might be your last minute, and it's not necessarily something in the future. There's at least 100 people in this room, I think, probably. I don't know. I don't look at my view counts. I don't care to know. But one of us will probably die much earlier than 75 or 80. And maybe one of us is a few months away from dying, right? That concept is something you really don't want to think about. You might want to like click the X on that stream because you're like, man, this guy is talking some real stuff. Like, I don't think I want to hear this right now. But you need to understand that, because that is what is going to make your life enriched. That is what's going to finally get you off your ass to do the things that you want to do, to be the person that you want to be. And when you meditate on this impermanence, when you think about that impermanence, when you confront that issue, that real issue, it's gonna make the real issue, the truth of it, right? And you don't ignore it, your life is going to be so much more valuable. So, and you're going to strive so much more, right? Like it's not going to be the situation of apathy that Buddhism is typically accused of, or people that meditate are typically accused of. It's going to be the opposite. You're going to want to do everything you possibly can to harness the moments of this life and make it into something of your own design that you're proud of. So, Hide the Zen is a chapter on a high level about this, where you can strive and push, and you ought to strive and push, and you should, but temper it by the knowledge that this is going away. So that you are, and I'm going to quote directly from Dan Harris here in the chapter. So I just love this quote. If you don't waste your energy on variables you can't influence, you can focus more on those you can. You do everything you can to succeed, but you aren't attached to the result of succeeding. Meaning that when an outcome happens that is bad, you aren't attached to that outcome emotionally, and you are ready to kind of like pick yourself back up and go after the next success. I think this is the most important part of this book, and the most important part of like what meditation can teach you. So 10% Happier is a book overall that's about practical self-help. There's nothing crazy spiritual in this book that is not the result of one person just sitting down for 10 minutes a day and saying, what is life about and how do I approach it? And there are a lot of people that did our 30-day meditation challenge. I'm really impressed by the number of people that did it, and I'm happy about it. Where did I put the link to this? Oh, here it is. Where did I put the link to the actual leaderboard? I know it's in the meditation channel. Huh. Let me go get it. On the Discord. So a lot of people signed up, and a lot of people even did a huge amount of the meditation. And a lot of people did better than I did, where I encountered Path of Exile in the middle of this month and completely exploded. So I only got about half of the month done as far as meditation goes. A lot of people did stay consistent, or they tried it out for a few days, and this was undoubtedly like a pretty big benefit. We were getting so many people in the meditation chats that said, "I tried this out and I got a lot out of it." And some people even completed the whole 30 days. It was amazing, awesome stuff. And I guarantee if those people come to talk today, it's going to be really interesting because they'll have a lot of really cool stuff to say. I'm going to join the book club room just in case anybody else has read the book and wants to talk about it. Where is the book club? This should just read book club, not December book club. Book club. Okay. And then a couple more thoughts about 10% Happier, and then we'll announce our next book. So a lot of people participated in the meditation challenge, and I write here in the 30-day meditation thing that I have a few like go-tos for exercise, getting enough sleep, etc. Like there are some things in life that you can just do that are just going to be objective improvements in your life. They cannot be debated. Eating well, like eating a lot of vegetables, exercise every day, get enough sleep. I put meditation on that same tier as a unequivocal benefit to absolutely anybody that could do it. And things like this are so rare in life. Oftentimes, like I have to answer something really subjective. Like if someone's like, well, should I eat this or should I not eat this? Like there's a lot of questions, but like meditating in this way that I described is just an objective benefit to absolutely everybody that does it. It's really crazy. It's as important as like getting sleep and exercise and everything else. So I hope that a few more people have tried it and will try it as a result of this book. Let's see. Is there anything else I want to talk about on this book or anybody that wants to talk about it in the book club channel? If you do, you can join it now. Otherwise, we'll move on.